very overwhelming trying to make friends as an adult outside of the workforce or outside of college. It's a little scary, and it feels kind of like I don't really know how to do here or what to do here, and so I'm just not going to do it, and like fully relate, very much want to value and validate that, but also... Okay, hi everybody. Thanks for coming back if you've been here before, or hi, welcome if you're new. My name is Mickey, I'm a therapist, and we talk about therapist-y things on this channel. And today we are talking about identity development. This is something that folks have asked me to make a video about before, and I have been trying to find a way to walk the line on this content, that it's still broad strokes and educational and about fact dispersal and educating rather than about therapizing people over the internet, because that's not allowed, that's not what we do here. And just to be super clear, all of the content on this channel is intended to be for entertainment and education only. We don't therapize people over the internet here. First of all, you can't do that, but second of all, it's illegal to try, so grain of salt as always. But I want to talk about this because I know there's a lot of questions about this, and we briefly discussed it in a Girl Defined video, and quite frankly, I just didn't have the time or the energy to get into it then, so we're getting into it now. For those of you who have experienced the like very millennial and Gen Z moment of like, oh god, maybe I don't have an identity, or I don't know who I am, or how am I supposed to find out who I am, this video is for you. We're going to talk about that a little bit today. We're going to talk about like some broad strokes education and like questions that you can ask yourself, things that we can reflect on as a community to help us feel more at peace with ourselves, to help us feel more at home, and to like do some self-discovery. I think these are things that we should talk about more as a culture, especially when there are people like Girl Defined really shoving the idea that religion is our whole identity down our throats. I want to talk about how to do this from a like secular evidence-based point of view, and potentially how to do this either on your own or with a therapist if you have access to one of those. So we're really doing the pointing thing today. I'm like really finger gunning it out. I don't know what that is about. Okay, first and foremost, I want to be super clear that identity development and answering this big question of like, who am I, is lifelong work. This is not something that you can sit down with your journal while you're watching this video and like have the answer. It doesn't work like that. But also, if you're putting all of your eggs in one basket, meaning that your like whole identity is defined by the person that you are here and now in present moment in the year 2023, that you might find that to not be a feasible plan long term. The reality is that as human beings, we change, we grow, we evolve over time. And so identity development and figuring out who we are is work that will continue to need to come back to the drawing board. It doesn't have to feel bad though. It doesn't have to be soul crushing or scary. And so I also want to encourage you to take that into account while we talk about this. While I pull up these notes, if you're new here, hi, thanks for coming. You should subscribe. Okay, so the first thing that I want to encourage folks to do, or like questions for reflection, is the thing that we directly mentioned in the Girl Defined video, which is starting small. I think we as a culture are very obsessed with this idea of having like a light bulb moment where we're like, oh my god, this is my identity. And the reality is that not all of us can be like Cher from Clueless and just have this like light from the heavens illuminate all of our life choices. And so it's important that we approach this work from a place of it being approachable and like actually doable. So start small. Ask yourself questions about your likes and dislikes, your preferences, things that matter to you, things that are interesting to you. This can be as small as like the types of food that you like to eat, or the types of media that you like to consume, the clothes that you enjoy wearing, the way that you prefer your home to be decorated. It can also be helpful to frame this, by the way, from an either or perspective. So asking yourself these very like Cosmo in 2013 quiz questions like, do I prefer to be a traveler or do I prefer to be a homebody? Am I a person who loves chocolate or savory foods? Do I like going fast or going slow? I don't know. Like these sort of either this or that questions can be a good place to start. And I know that this might feel like, Mickey, why are you asking me about whether I would like pizza or spaghetti? That's not a real question. That's not really helpful in my identity work. And like, I hear you, I get that, but also keep in mind that personhood, being a human, is inherently complex. It's filled with wonder and magic and complexity. And so in order for us to add up to this full picture of like a fully fleshed out, very rich, lived human life, it includes those small things like whether you prefer to have your hair up or down. It matters, those things, because it informs the way that we operate in the world, it informs the way that we see the world, it informs the way that we behave in relationships, the type of relationships that we're looking for, how we want our life to look. All of that fucking matters when we talk about your identity. So be nice to yourself and start small, especially if that's the place that you're at where you're feeling very overwhelmed. It's okay to just take stock of likes and dislikes and to like maybe table that for a little while and really sit, maybe observe carefully, casually throughout your day-to-day, the choices that you're making, the things that you're feeling drawn to. The next thing that I want to encourage you to explore is to think broadly. When we talk about values and beliefs and ethics and morals and those types of things, it can feel very overwhelming and people can kind of get lost in the sauce, I think, with like the specific minutia of like whether this is right or wrong. So I want to encourage you to zoom out. In the way that I encourage you to zoom in on the last thing, zoom out, zoom all the fucking way out on this one and reflect on like, what are my core beliefs and values about the world? How do I think the world ought to be? How do I think I should be? Sometimes as a tip, by the way, it's helpful to think more so about your response to things. If you're having a hard time drawing up these words to encapsulate your core values about life, notice when you have like that sinking gut feeling about like, ooh, I did something wrong, or like that did make me feel good about myself. Where's that coming from? Is that violating a core belief or value that you hold? And so therefore, what is it? I think generally when we talk about finding an identity, it's also important for us to have like a North Star in a sense. Generally, how do we believe the world works? What do we want to believe about the world? What are the ways that we want to conduct ourselves in the world? What are things that really matter to us in relationships, in community, in families, in like self-love? What sort of guiding principles help to inform what you're looking for in life, what you need to feel fulfilled in life? Those are all useful questions. I want to pause here though, give a clear caveat that this is overwhelming. It feels very scary to do all of this. And so first of all, I would encourage you to not try to do all of this in one day, all at the same time, because you can get lost in the sauce, but also because it can feel very overwhelming. And the tendency when we don't have answers to all of these questions right off the bat is to be like, oh God, like it's all bad. That's not true. It is okay for you to feel confused and overwhelmed. It's a lot, like this type of identity work is a lot. And again, it's something that we're doing over the course of the lifespan. So pause. Maybe don't try to answer all of those questions one back to back to back to back, but they're just good things to keep an eye on. In addition to that, I want to encourage folks, if you have the space, have the time, you're not feeling overwhelmed and in a deep place of existential dread, to ask yourself the questions about like, what do I want my legacy to be? How do I want to be remembered? What are the things that will fulfill me for the course of my whole life? And how can I incorporate those as a part of my daily lived experience? Sometimes it's helpful to frame this as asking yourself, I know that this is a morbid question, by the way, but like, bear with me. I think it's still useful thinking, what are the things that you would hope are being said about you at your funeral? Like when your core community and loved ones and deepest relationships are reflecting on the life that you lived, the impact that you had on others and on the world, what are you hoping that they're going to say? And then taking that to inform, again, how does that impact my values and beliefs, and what does that mean about how I want to live my life? And how can I bring that into the fold of my day-to-day experience more often? The third thing that I want to talk to you about is shying away from using work as your identity. Now, hear me out. I know that we, especially in America, we do this a lot. We love doing this because I think this is like the single greatest con that capitalism has ever pulled off, is convincing all of us that our inherent worth and belonging in community is dependent upon being productive at work for the sake of putting profit in corporations' pockets. And so it's very easy to get sucked into. I think a lot of us get sucked into it. But this does not serve your best purpose, and I'm going to tell you why. The reality is that even if you are a person who's lucky enough to work in a profession where you really do love your job, you value your job, like me, for example, clearly I've made a lot of my life about being a therapist, but I think there's a very key differentiation between your identity being in the actual job title and the like work and the impact that you're having. The reason that I love being a therapist and that I, value that profession and that title and all those things is because I love people. I love like working with people, helping people. I feel a call towards service. And I also have like a deep respect and like reverence for human life. And I think people deserve to enjoy their fucking time on earth. And so while being a therapist is the thing that is a vehicle for me to help people and to achieve those goals, it is not the core piece of my identity. The like guiding principles there are about like love and respect for others, a value for community, a desire to be of service and to be of help to others. And those are like core guiding pillars when we talk about like, where the fuck is my life going? So even if you are a person, again, who feels fortunate enough to be in this job that you do really love and that you like really value about yourself, what about it is actually valuable to you? And I want to encourage folks to reflect on like the deeper underlying meaning there, rather than putting your identity in the basket of like, the actual 9 to 5 work that I'm doing at my job. It's not to say that it can't be part of your identity, because it very much can, and it is okay for you to value your job or to care about the work that you're doing. However, I want to discourage folks from using this as a crutch and saying like, I don't need to have other identity, or I don't need to do further exploration because I love my job, because it's very limiting. The reality is that, first of all, not all of us can work for the entirety of our lives. But second of all, we as human beings are not designed to exist in this like corporate, privatized, like for-profit world solely. There's so much like rich and wonderful and beautiful human experience that can be had outside of that world. And so I really want to encourage you to embrace your humanhood in this exercise. You don't just exist to work at a corporation or at a job or to like be a professional. Even if you, again, do really love your job, you very much are complex and valuable outside of that work. So focus in on some other things, incorporate some other things in your identity. For what it's worth, we also as a culture do this a lot with parenthood. This is very, very common work that therapists help folks do, is unlearning this idea that being a parent is your whole fucking identity. That's not true. That's not true. At the core, you are an individual, you are a human, and you deserve to have an identity that serves and fulfills all of these other aspects of you outside of parenthood. It's not to say that being a parent isn't really fucking important, and it's very important that you like care about that and participate in that, because obviously that's important. And it is okay for part of your identity to be being a parent, being a mother, being a father, whatever. But in the same way that being a professional or being like in a job is not your whole identity, neither is being your parent, neither is being like a spouse, for what it's worth, or like really anything. I really want to discourage folks from doing the thing where we label one thing as our identity and that's it. The reality is that we need to pull from a variety of different little baskets to put them all in one big one, so that we have like the variety and the complexity and the richness. You get it. Along with that, I think this is a nice segue into talking about hobbies and interests. This is a very important part of identity development, and I know that a lot of you are probably going to groan at me for talking about this, because especially as millennials, it's very overwhelming trying to make friends as an adult outside of the workforce or outside of college. It's a little scary, and it feels kind of like I don't really know how to do here or what to do here, and so I'm just not going to do it, and like fully relate, very much want to value and validate that. But also, the reality is that from like a research perspective, like a humanistic or like anthropological perspective, we as human beings are wired for community. We very much need to exist in a place where we feel like we belong somewhere. This is why we love categorizing people and putting people into groups and forming cliques. Like we've talked about this ad nauseum on the channel. You guys get it, I think, I hope. And so while it is scary, it can feel very overwhelming to try to develop hobbies and interests and how to turn that into community. I want to encourage you to explore that anyways, because when we talk about how do I know who I am or what I am, that doesn't exist in a vacuum. Your identity doesn't exist in its own little pod separate from humanity. Part of the way that we develop our identity and discover who we are is by doing that in community. This, for what it's worth, is also why I fucking hate when people say, you can't learn to love anybody else until you love yourself. That's not true. It's hateful, it's fucked up, and the reality is that a lot of healing happens in community, and it's very, very important for us to have a safe place where we feel like we belong, where people who get us, people who like resonate with our core values and our North Stars and the things that we talked about earlier. Finding that community is an integral piece of feeling at home in the world. So with this, again, I want to give the advice or like encouragement here that if you're feeling adrift in terms of like, I don't know what my hobbies are, I don't do anything. Maybe start small in assessing, again, the types of TV shows, the types of media that you like to consume. Even something as simple as like how you choose to spend your free time when you're not at work can inform us about the type of person that you are. For example, I am a homebody. I love being at home. I love leisuring. I love resting. I love silly little video games and watching the same comfort TV show over and over and over and over and over again. I won't resonate in a community of people who want to be going out, bar crawling, drinking, doing all the things all the time, because I'm tired. I want to be at home. I want to be cozy. I want to be comfy. And so even something as simple as analyzing like, what do I do in my free time, can be illuminating about the type of person that you are. So along with that, I think creating a community aspect to the hobbies and the interests that you have can be very helpful. I have a bunch of examples that I wrote on my phone because it's very common to get pushback about this. Like, well, I don't know how I turn that hobby into a community thing. Like, I don't know how I would do that. Don't worry. I figured out how to do it for you. Or like I have some examples anyways, some like encouragement and examples here. For a person who loves reading, we can very easily dovetail that into a book club or like a like read aloud situation. For somebody who loves painting or illustration or like art classes, paint with me, wine nights, like those types of community things. Very much a resource in most big cities. I would say like most cities generally, but especially in big cities. If you're a person who really loves playing video games or you love like fantasy TV shows and things like that, playing D&D, being part of like a group of people who also read comic books or also like do this sort of realm of thing, very much a possibility. Almost every major city has like a RPG board game shop thing, and usually there's like a billboard there or like a little bulletin board. That's the not a billboard, a bulletin board with like meetups and groups and people who are looking for new members and things like that. If you are a person who likes a particular show or movie or like series or whatever, in again almost every major goddamn city on the planet there are like trivia nights, especially if you like The fucking Office. Every fucking city has a goddamn trivia night for The Office, I swear to God. And it's always at a craft brewery, and if that's your like kind of thing, that's like very much a thing that you can do, and it's actually really easy to meet people in environments like that. If you're a spiritual person, if you're a religious person, going to church and actually engaging in the community events is a really useful way to build community. Same thing goes with like sort of alternative religion stuff like astrology, witchcraft, crystals, etc., like new age things. Going to a local like metaphysical store and seeing if they have classes, if they have an astro salon, if they have tarot card workshops, things like that. There's like a very easy foot in the door in terms of finding your people that way. Working out, going to like classes or like talking to people at the gym who are safe. But like running groups, hiking groups, those are like very much things that people do. If you're a person who likes music, going to festivals and concerts and like small dive bars where there's local music being played, like this is what I'm talking about. I want to encourage people to do the thing that is scary where we just put our foot in the door for community things that are related to your hobbies and interests. Obviously, it's important for you to figure out what your hobbies and interests are first. I know that it is scary and it feels very overwhelming, and I also want to encourage people to be safe. Don't be reckless about it. But I think a lot of times when we struggle to develop community and we feel like there's just not really any resources, like potentially, especially if you live in a rural area, that's very much an issue. But also even creating community digitally is like a very valuable thing. And a lot of us just shy away from it because it's scary. And while I want to validate that, I also want to encourage folks to confront the fear, to push past the fear, especially if you have a therapist. This is useful work to be doing. You can go to a thing, and even if you fucking hate it, then you get to bitch about it with your therapist after and then talk about like, why was this not a good fit? Why did you hate it so much? How can we set you up with resources for success in the future? Oh, also as a tidbit, this is the case in my city. I don't know if it works this way in other places. I would assume that it does, but public libraries are a fantastic fucking resource for low cost and free things to do. Here in Tucson, you can go to the public library as long as you have a library card, which is free and easy to get, by the way. Go support your local libraries. It's a very important resource. But you can sign up for a library card and get free tickets to the zoo, to like the aquarium, to like most museums and like art museums and things like that. And so especially if you have kids or like if you're just a person who wants to participate in community stuff more often, that's a very valuable resource. And so I want to encourage people to do that also. But generally, if you're having a hard time with this question of like, who am I? What is my identity? It can also be helpful to start with the questions of like, what am I not? I think sometimes we can get, again, lost in the sauce with trying to figure out like, who am I? And so especially, again, this is useful work to be doing in therapy, by the way. If you are a person who had childhood or chronic trauma, or you just like don't resonate with your family of origin anymore, why is that? Like what values about the way that you were brought up don't resonate with you anymore? And sometimes asking yourself like, what's the opposite of that then? Or what are the things like, even if you're not a person with trauma, just like generally about the world, what are things that are offensive to me that I don't like, values and beliefs that I know for sure are not mine? Why are those so offensive to me? How can I find things that maybe resonate better? Again, exploring like what potentially is the opposite of that, etc., etc. Generally, I want to encourage folks again to be mindful that this is a lifelong journey. This is something you'll have to continue to do. And so creating opportunities for regular check-ins can be really, really useful. Again, this is a great conversation to have with a therapist, but this can also be done on your own through journaling or like meditating, like conversations with others, just like deeply reflecting, or like in your quiet time while you're like reflecting on your day, whatever. Continue to check in with that. It can be a helpful resource. I think people sometimes undercut the value of just like quiet reflection time with yourself. And again, I want to encourage folks to be kind to themselves because this is very confusing work, but it is very much worth it. It is very much fulfilling and life-giving, especially when you're able to get to a place where you're feeling more like settled and situated with your identity. So I hope this helped. If you like the video, let me know what your guys' thoughts and feelings are in the comments. I'm happy to provide clarification. Again, to be clear, I can't comment on anyone's specific situation because I can't therapize people over the internet, but I'm happy to clarify any of the points in the video. Subscribe to the channel. We make videos like this in a cute pop culture moment now and again, so I'd love to have you stay. And share the video to help the channel grow and to help each other grow, and I will see you guys next time.